I was just wondering if I could get an update on this tropical storm and the amount of rainfall.
Well, that's the worst part of the forecast that they have right now. I mean, they've, we've been talking about that. They're still saying that we could get 7 for the 3 day period.
That was seven
Uh,
to what?
7 to 12 between now and Wednesday noonish.
Okay.
Uh, but earlier they had been talking like 15 and possibly 20 in spots. But when this track shifted, they're lowering it. And they're telling us in our meetings that their guess on the rain is probably the weakest part of the forecast that they have.
Okay. And who is they? That's the National Weather.
They being the National Weather Service and also the West Gulf River Forecast Center.
Okay.
Because that's who we work with. Because one of our fears when you're getting this much rain is obviously, what's going to happen with the rivers. And the larger rivers, it's not that bad, but your shorter rivers and your smaller things are much more susceptible to these real heavy rainfalls. So we'll be keeping a closer eye on San Bernard, West Bernard Creek, Tres Palacios, East Mustang Creek, those type deal, because you get a 10-inch rain on one of those, and you got some problems. Yeah,
Right. And so, what about wind? Are there any wind advisories?
I've been having some calls with some of the superintendents because they're obviously very interested to see what the wind's going to do because of the bus running tomorrow. And right now, the program that I have, there's a software program I have called Hurrivac, which is tied into the National Hurricane Center. And I can put a spot on the map and say, okay, tell me what the winds are going to be here at such and such a time, or what time are tropical storm winds going to, start up at this location.
Mm-hmm.
So like in Bowling now, based on the forecast that we have right now as of 10 o'clock, they would start to have 40-mile-an-hour winds in Bowling at 11 o'clock tomorrow morning.
Mm-hmm.
And that would stay until 5 o'clock the next day. Now, this doesn't mean that the winds are going to go blow constantly and continuously. It just, as those rain bands come in, then you could have, these are tropical storm force winds. So it starts at 11 o'clock in Bowling and 5 o'clock tomorrow afternoon in East Bernard, also in Louise, and then also in Pierce it would be 4 o'clock tomorrow. And we have to look at this also as to what do we want to do with like county employees coming into work. And that's something
Mm-hmm.
that the judge will be looking at and saying, okay, do come in, don't come in, what they're going to do.
Okay. And then, do you advise the school districts on what to do as far as continuing with the in-person schools?
Not really. I mean, they know, they have their criteria. It's not so much advise. I just furnish them with information and say, here's what the forecast says that we're going to do. It's much the same as this, or snow and ice, or anything like flooding. We give them the information, but the school districts ultimately make their own choices and go with the information that we have.
Okay. And what do you suggest for people in the county right now? The rain just started, I believe, just drizzles. But
And hopefully if you've got loose things in your yard and all that type of stuff, you had a chance to get all that picked up. We're still looking at the winds 40 to 50 miles an hour between late tomorrow night and into Tuesday. So, the winds are going to be a problem, but they're not going to be huge. The rainfall is what we're more scared about, because that's the turnaround, don't drown thing is so true,
Right.
because it's scary, especially if you're driving at night and you see the thing and you're not sure how deep that water is. So we're going to be watching the rainfall very carefully. We do tell people, don't get your emergency information off of Facebook. Get your emergency information off of the NOAA weather radio systems, or live radio, or something live, but something 24 hours. Have an app on your phone that you can get emergency information, because a lot of times, and especially with flash flooding, you need to do something, and you need to do something right then.
Right. And so what app would you recommend?
The one that I use is the NOAA weather radio. I mean, I've got a NOAA weather radio. As far as your apps, I'd go with the one from the National Weather Service, and you can go to weather.gov/HGX and find out how to get it from there. That's the Weather Service website.
Okay.
And that way you'll get the warnings and watches and everything else.
Okay. And what is there anything else that I might have forgotten to ask you?
Well, the main thing is being aware, and because this one, that thing can turn very quickly and change. It right now, they're pretty confident that it's not going to gain strength. It's going to come in as a tropical storm. And that's really kind of strange, because usually that's the weakest part of the forecast is intensity. But because it's being sheared pretty well, and there's not a whole lot of time left as far as it being over water, it looks like, okay, the intensity level, it will not be a hurricane when it comes in. It's going to be a strong tropical storm. But just really keep an eye out for that rain, because anytime that you have something that's moving this slow, you have a chance for some really, really heavy rainfall. And so keep an eye on that, and so that you're sure that wherever you are driving, what's going to go on. And stay tuned to the school districts and see what their websites are going to say. See who's going to be open or not, because if the winds are going to be blowing that hard, if the winds are going to be blowing over 40, 50 miles an hour, they won't run those buses.
Okay. And then what if someone were to experience major flooding, what would you recommend? Who would they call?
Well, they need to call if they're going to need help, if they're going to need to get out, then they need to call 911. And then we will try to get in there and try to get them out. Okay. We're not expecting any flooding of homes with this, but again, it certainly can happen. And if that's the case, we do have some high water vehicles and things that we could use to go get people out.
Okay.
So call 911 is what you need to do.
Are there any interesting points, roadways that you kind of have a feeling that they're going to be flooded?
I mean, we have the ones that seem like they always go under. Here in town, you've got the Milam Street back over Fulton Street by the Baptist Church, 102 there in front of Jack in the Box. Those problem deals, they're going to be problems regardless, and we know that's going to happen. Most of those, if we get a heavy rainfall, they'll flood, and then when it quits and you get a couple of hours, they'll drain off. Out in the county, we're going to really be closely watching the San Bernard River and the West Bernard Creek, because San Bernard River would go back and then flood into the El Lobo subdivision and back up in there. So we keep an eye on that. There's a couple of spots out in Lobo that we know we're going to probably lose the roads or bridges on, or not lose them. They'll be inaccessible. So we'll be keeping an eye on some of those low water spots out in the county, and the commissioners know where they are, and they'll have barricades ready to go set up to keep people from going into the high water.
Okay.